Yes, ma'am. It goes through. It was enough for us to decide that we should get it for the
All right, I guess we're ready to proceed. My name is Sheriff Ron Schweibke, Chairman of the Municipal Police Training Council. Welcome you to the 247th meeting of the Council. And I would ask that Chief McBride lead us in the pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I ask that we have a moment of silence for all those that in public safety and in the military that serve us every day and in their honor. Thank you very much. We have an agenda today regarding a hearing. We have some action items, and we also have some informational update items. Before we proceed, I'd like to go around the room and say who you are and who you represent. We'll start from my left.
Bruce McBride, Commissioner for Police, State University of New York, retired.
Stephen James, Colonel, Employee Relations, State Police.
Mike Wood, Deputy Commissioner at DCGS.
Kevin Schwepke, Town of Queens Police Department.
I'm Andre Dahlbeck. I'm Associate General Counsel for Council 82, the ASME.
Bill LeBeau, I'm the Staff Director of Council 82 and a retired lieutenant from the City of Coast Police Department.
Okay.
Johanna Sullivan, Director of the Office of Public Safety, DCJS.
Okay.
Natasha Harvin, Associate Attorney, DCJS.
Okay.
David Mahaney, OPS.
Okay.
Tim Parisi, Ilion Police Chief, and representing New York State Association of Chiefs of Police.
Over here.
Allison Floyd with the Office of Public Safety at DCJS. Molly Bates, DCJS.
I'm Mitch Borowski, New York State Attorney General's Office.
Okay.
Kevin Fairchild, DCGS.
Jill Spadero, DCJS Press Office.
Gabe Maruso, DCJS.
Sarah Dier, DCJS.
Dan Polak, DCJS.
Matt Griffin, DCJS. Dan Nedwell, DCJS.
Chris Farina, DCJS.
Scott Knapp, DCJS.
Cindy Neff, DCJS.
Jack Clancy, New York State Police.
John McElwain, New York State Police.
Okay, thank you. And on the video link, we should have Chief David Zach, who's a member of the council. David, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And we also have Professor John Clovis, who's a member of the council. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, gentlemen. I believe on the telephone we have, do we have Chief Bodette from NYPD?
You have Chief Shortell.
Oh, Chief Shortell, okay. Thank you, Teresa.
Sheriff, I just wonder if the people participating via video would mind muting themselves so that we don't have a little bit of the feedback.
Is it possible, David and John, that you could go on to mute on your end and just listen?
Yep.
All done.
Okay, thank you very much.
There we go.
All right, before us we have an agenda for today's business. I would ask that we adopt that agenda, and I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
So move. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, the agenda has been adopted for today's business. The chair notes that with the three members that are here present and the two members that are on the video link, that we do have a quorum. And so for the record, let the record note that. Okay, the first order of business is a hearing regarding an instructor certification. And if you will bear with me for a moment, I got some preliminary remarks to make about that. The Municipal Police Training Council is holding a hearing today to determine whether a law enforcement officer's MPTC instructor certifications should be revoked. I am Sheriff Ronald Spike, and as chairman of the MPTC, I will be presiding over the hearing. The MPTC hearing is subject to the Open Meetings Law, and as such is being recorded. For the suspension pending revocation process, the Commissioner of the Division of Criminal Justice Services, DCJS, is authorized with the general advice of the Council to certify and issue certificates to qualified instructors. Equally, and in accordance with Section 6023.7 of Title IX of the New York State Official Complication of Codes, Rules, and Regulations, the Commissioner may revoke an instructor certification for cause upon receipt of a written complaint alleging details regarding the times, places, and dates of the alleged incidents and the action or omission alleged. Reasons for such revocation may include, but not be limited to, the violation of any applicable rules and regulations, including, but not limited to, any provisions of the Municipal Police Training Program Regulations 9 NYCRR Article 2. Pursuant to MPTC and DCJS policies and procedures, the Commissioner of DCJS has the authority to suspend the MPTC instructor certifications granted to an individual pending a hearing to determine if the certification should be revoked. All parties who are suspended pending revocation are entitled to request a hearing within 15 days of receipt of the notice of suspension. We are here today because you have chosen to exercise that right and have requested a hearing. Regarding the hearing process, this hearing will be guided by the New York State Administrative Procedures Guide, also known as SAPA, S-A-P-A. Article 3 of SAPA, entitled Adjudicatory Proceedings, sets forth procedures for administrative hearings, including timeframes, notice including substance, rules adopted by agencies, argument, and settlement. SAPA delineates the powers of the presiding officer and authorizes me as chairman of the council to regulate the course of these hearings and ministros. As an overview, we will hear one party at a time. First, DCJS will present testimony and evidence as to why they believe that such instructor certification should be revoked. The respondent will have an opportunity to question each DCJS witness after they testify. Then the respondent and/or the respondent's attorneys or representatives may produce any evidence, including testimony, supporting their position. DCJS will have an opportunity to question respondents' witnesses as well. Council members will have an opportunity to question DCJS and/or respondents' witnesses after witnesses are questioned by both parties. Regarding standards of proof and evidentiary rules, this type of hearing is not subject to the same rules of evidence observed in courts of law. For instance, SAPA Section 306 specifies that the standard of review here is that the agency's determination must be supported by and in accordance with substantial evidence. In addition, hearsay, which is a written or oral statement or even body language that was made outside of the courtroom or is presented within the courtroom for its truth, is admissible. Addressing substantial evidence, the New York State Courts of Appeal, New York State's highest court, stated in the matter of Hogg versus Potsdam that we emphasize that the substantial evidence standard is a minimal standard. It is less than a preponderance of evidence. Regarding hearsay, the same decision also noted, moreover, hearsay is admissible as competent evidence in an administrative proceeding, and if sufficiently relevant and probative, may constitute substantial evidence. I will rule on any objections. Regarding the determination, after both parties have presented their case and the council members have concluded questioning, the council will deliberate on whether or not to recommend that the certification be revoked. The council will deliberate in executive session after the hearing, which will not be open to non-council members. However, the council will announce its determination in an open meeting. After a determination is made, the council will provide its recommendation to the Commissioner of DCJS per MPTC and DCJS policies and procedures. The Commissioner will make the ultimate decision in the matter. The Commissioner in writing will render his decision and the reasons for such decision within 90 days after the date of the hearing. A copy of this written decision will be sent to you and your attorney or representative. Finally, before we get started, as a reminder, all hearings will be recorded, so please speak clearly and loudly. Thank you. With that being said, Ms. Harvin, with DCJS, are you ready to proceed?
Yes. Sorry. But first, my opening statement. Good morning, council members and chairman. As you know, my name is Natasha Harvin Locklear, and I represent the Division of Criminal Justice Services. Today, the division presents before you the matter of the Instructor Certification of Police Officer Kevin Schwepke. At this hearing, the state will prove with substantial evidence that Officer Schwepke engaged in gross violations of rules and regulations established by the MPTC. Specifically, that while working in the capacity as a certified field training officer, Officer Kevin Schwepke failed to adhere to the MPTC rules and regulations governing the basic course for police officers when the supervised field training review and orientation completed as a required portion of that course for police officers for certain Women's Police Department recruits not conducted in accordance with 9 NYCRR section 6020.3D. Please be advised, counsel, that the parties have already stipulated to the admissibility of state exhibits 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 11, and 14, which are included in the hearing books today. Now I call Mr. Mahaney.
Okay, Mr. Mahaney, you're the first witness. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you under the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, you may proceed.
Again, Mr. Mahaney, can you please state your full name for the record?
David Mahaney.
And where do you work?
I work for the Division of Criminal Justice Services, Office of Public Safety.
How long have you been with the division?
19 years.
And what is your job title at the division?
Associate Training Technician.
And how long have you been in that position?
Since February of 2014.
And now can you please explain for everyone here your duties and responsibilities?
Sure. So generally speaking, my primary responsibilities are to oversee the maintenance of the Central State Registry of Police and Peace Officers. In addition to that, I'm responsible for ensuring that law enforcement agencies across the state are complying with the training standards that are established by this council, including the basic course for police officers. My unit's also responsible for handling complaints that would be received by outside entities that fall within the division's purview as it relates to the registry, training, and certification of police officers in New York State.
Now, you mentioned the basic course for police officers. Can you explain, briefly the requirements?
Yep, so the basic course for police officers is roughly 700 hours of instructional curriculum. The final component of the academy is a supervised field training program that's a minimum of 160 hours.
Now, you mentioned that you look into complaints received in violations of MPTC standards. Now, you look into those complaints. Is your process of your investigation all a part of your normal course of business?
Yes, it is.
And did there ever come a point in time where you had to look into a complaint regarding the respondent, Officer Schwepke?
Yes, I did.
Please explain.
In January of 2019, I received a phone call from Chief Investigator Tony Karam of the Office of Attorney General's Public Integrity Bureau. He had informed me on the phone that they received an email complaint alleging the falsification of supervised field training paperwork for Queens recruit officers in the calendar year 2018.
And did you ever receive that email from?
I did. In fact, he forwarded it to me while we were on the phone.
Okay, at this time, I would like to mark for identification State Exhibit number 5. If you give a copy if you don't always have it to the respondent? No. You got it? Okay. Mr. Mahaney, I am now showing you, one second. Mr. Mahaney, I am now showing you what has been marked as State Exhibit 5. Do you recognize this?
I do.
And what is it?
It's the email that Tony Karam had sent me.
And this is about, the email about?
Yeah, so it's the email about the alleged falsification of the supervisor field training paperwork.
And other than the redactions, is this an exact copy of the email that you received from Chief Investigator Tony Karam?
Yes, it is.
Okay, now I'd like to enter State's Exhibit 5 into evidence.
Do you have the email? Do you have the exhibit? Is that available? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Got it.
For those who are participating in video conference, the exhibits are being emailed to you right now. So if you check your email, you should have them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Mr. Mahaney.
They need copy.
Go ahead.
You want to wait until the chair and have a chance to review the email?
Sorry?
Do you want to wait until they have a chance to review the email, and then I'd ask for some more here?
Did you get the exhibit, Mr. Dahl?
I do, yes.
Okay. Okay, we're in receipt.
Okay.
Receipt. I'd ask for voir dire of the witness regarding the email.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mahaney, my name's Andre Dahlbeck. I represent Mr. Schwebke. I just have a couple questions regarding your receipt of the email and the origins of the email to the best of your knowledge. Okay. You said you had a conversation with Mr. Karen at the Attorney General's office. Is that right?
No, he called me on the telephone.
Okay. And you had a conversation at that time?
Yes.
And was that January 11th, 2019?
I believe so, yes.
And he forwarded you the email you said from at the time you were having the conversation. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And when he forwarded you the email, did you ask him of the process of receipt of that email?
Excuse me?
Did you ask him about the process of receiving that kind of email at the Attorney General's
He had
office?
indicated to me that it came through their complaints email box.
Have you ever seen the complaints email box or the complaint system at the Attorney General's office?
Objection. He doesn't work there. How would he?
Well, I mean,
It's an AG's box.
Well, he's testifying to the document.
He's testifying to what he received from the AG, not how their process works. He doesn't know how their process works.
Well, I'm asking him that question. I want to know how much he knows about the process.
It's not relevant.
It's perfectly relevant, the receipt of a complaint email.
To understand our process, he's not going to know. That's not a part of his duties. It's to
Well, you
ask
can
the
let the witness
process of
testify
getting-
to that, then, Ms. Harbin.
Well, let's answer the question.
No, I do not.
Okay. And, but did you have a conversation with him about that process at all?
No, I did not.
Nothing in detail?
No.
He just said no.
Have you? One more question. Have you received other complaints similarly in the past in your training?
Objection from
Withdrawn. Let me rephrase it. You've been working for 5 years in this capacity. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is it part of your everyday role to when a complaint comes into the AG's office regarding the function of training around the state that you receive the complaint?
We have worked with the AG before on previous complaints that fall within the division's purview. Yes.
Okay. And have some of those arrived from email, by email?
I do not know.
You don't have any recollection of any arriving by email?
I don't.
I'll stipulate to the exhibit.
Okay, Exhibit 5 is admitted into the record. Ms. Harbin?
Okay. Speaking on State Exhibit number 5, Mahaney. Actually, you have it in your booklet as well. Let's see. Here's in your booklet. And it would be.
It's not going to be on this.
Okay. All right. So speaking on State Exhibit number 5. So neither you nor Mr. Tony Karam of the AG's office generated this email chain, correct?
No.
No, you didn't. You didn't generate the email chain.
No, I did not generate the email chain.
So what, if anything, stood out to you about this email that was forwarded by Chief Investigator Cram?
Upon reviewing the email, I noticed that the email originated from within the Queens Police Department.
And how did you come to that conclusion?
It's redacted now, but the from Queens, and then it's a Queens PD address.
You said the address. The
Email address, and then also down in the body of the email, salutation, Mr. First name Queens, last name officer, and then the address, the physical mailing address of the PD.
And what, if anything, else stood out to you about this email, Mr. Mahaney?
That it alleged. Do you want me to read the email?
If it stood out to you, yes.
So in the body of the email, it stated the Queens Police Department has been falsifying training records for recruits for at least the past calendar year, totaling 4 recruits in that time. A certified training officer has completed all FTO paperwork. However, he has not been working during the shifts he has claimed to be on as an FTO. The recruits are told to ride with a different officer every day, including an officer with less than 6 months experience herself. Only one other officer has the legally required field training officer training. Official DCJS documents have been signed and filed by both the chief and a separate FTO, Kevin Schwepke, who was working at a different police department during some training shifts he claimed to be providing training during.
Now, looking at this email, it mentions, acronyms like FTO and FTO paperwork. Can you please explain?
Yep, so they're referring to the daily observation reports that are used by certified FTOs to evaluate police recruits, observed performance and behavioral skills in a patrol setting.
And FTO stands for?
A field training officer.
So after you read this email, what did you do in response to it?
The first thing I did was I went into our records and I pulled all the BCPO class rosters submitted by the Zone 5 Regional Training Academy for the calendar year 2018. Upon doing that, I noticed that Zone 5 had conducted 2 sessions of the BCPO in 2018. Each class roster contained the names of 2 Queens PD officers. So at that point, I realized it was aligning with what was in the email complaint as far as having 4 Queens officers involved.
Now, you said the BCPO.
That's the basic course for police officers.
Okay. So when you realized that the numbers that you found the 4 numbers aligned with the 4 numbers or the 4 officers in the email, what did you do with those records?
So the first thing I did was to contact Rocco Fragomeni, who's the training director at Zone 5, to request that he send me all of the DORs and final summary evaluations submitted by Queens PD in the calendar year 2018.
And who were the names of the DORs?
Arnold, Case, Hazelton, and Stark.
Okay. And why did you contact Rocco Fragomeni?
I contacted Rocco because as the training academy director, it's his responsibility to collect the DORs and final summary evaluations from each recruit's employing agency. It's also his responsibility to maintain the daily observation reports for the division's inspection upon our request.
So what, if anything, is forwarded to the division?
The final summary evaluation must be submitted for each recruit.
So it's fair to say that the DORs are not forwarded to the division?
They are not. Again, they're to be maintained by the academy.
So again, so the division does not see the DORs unless requested?
Unless requested, correct.
And did you request those DORs from the individuals mentioned from Mr. Fragomenti?
I did.
And how did you request?
By
phone, did you do it in writing?
I followed up the phone call with an email with the officers' names, the specific officers' names. And at that point, he indicated he would scan them and email them to me. If I recall correctly, he had an issue with the scanner, so he had to send them through the U.S. mail.
At this time, I would like to mark State's Exhibit number 6 for identification. Mr. Mahaney, I'm showing you State Exhibit number 6. Let me know if you recognize that.
I do.
And what is it?
It's the email that I sent Rocco requesting the documentation, the daily observation reports.
And did he also respond?
He did.
Okay. And the recruits again that you submitted the request for?
Arnold, Case, Hazelton, and Stark.
And other than the redactions in this email, is it the exact copy of the email that exchanged between you and Mr. Fragomeni?
Yes, it is.
At this time, I'd like to enter State Exhibit number 6 into evidence.
No objection. Okay, Exhibit 6 is accepted into evidence.
So you mentioned earlier that Mr. Fragomeni had an issue, with his scanner, so he sent the DORs via mail.
Correct.
So you received them, correct?
I did.
Okay, and what did you do once you received the DORs?
I reviewed each of the DORs for the 4 recruits.
And these DORs that you reviewed, they constitute what is State Exhibit number 7 in the hearing book? Page 15.
Correct.
Now, reviewing these DORs, what, if anything, first caught your attention?
The first thing that caught my attention was that Officer Schwepke was the primary FTO for the clear majority of the DORs, the signatory for those DORs.
So he was the primary signatory?
Correct.
For the DORs?
For the majority of the DORs.
Okay. And after you reviewed these DORs, did you summarize your findings?
I did. So to help myself review them, I created a chart that outlined the supervised field training that Officer Schwepke had conducted since January of 2018.
At this time, I would like to mark for identification States Exhibits 8 and 9.
Are you going to ask for entrance of Exhibit 7?
I'm sorry? Exhibit 7's already, I'm sorry?
Did we stipulate to it?
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
So 7 has already been stipulated to. It's already in the hearing book.
Yes, seven's in the record.
We're now moving on to Exhibits 8 and 9 that I'm marking at this time for identification. Mr. Mahaney, I'm showing you States Exhibit 8. At the same time as I'm showing you State Exhibit 9s. Do you recognize these exhibits?
I do.
And what are they?
Again, they're the outlines I created to reflect the supervised field training conducted by Officer Schwepke since January of 2018.
And for those 4 recruits that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, for Michael Case, Kelly Arnold, Robert Stark, and Alex Hazelton.
Now, have these charts or outlines been changed or altered in any way since you created them?
They have not.
And is it normal course of business for you to summarize your findings?
Yes.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to enter States Exhibits 8 and 9 into evidence.
No objection.
Okay, there being no objections, 8 and 9 are admitted into evidence.
Now, we're looking at these charts for Michael Case, Kelly Arnold, Alexander Hazelton, and Robert Stark. Can you explain the chart for Michael Case and Kelly Arnold?
Sure. So this summarizes, again, the supervised field training conducted by Officer Schwepke since January of 2016. More specifically, the DOR shift dates and shift times for the recruits Michael Case and Kelly Arnold. As you'll see, the first shift was conducted June 8th, and their last shift was conducted July 4th. July 3rd to July 4th.
That's fair.
Kelly Arnold had 18 shifts, equaling 144 hours, and Michael Case had 20 shifts, equaling 160 hours. And that reflects the DOR signed by Officer Schwepke.
Okay, you mentioned that Arnold had 18 shifts at 144 hours and Case had 20 shifts at 160 hours. What's the total of those hours?
So if my math is correct, that's 304.
And these shifts on this chart, they're 8-hour shifts?
Correct.
And based on this chart, how many DORs did FTO Schwepke sign between June 8th and July 3rd?
I believe it was 38 separate DORs he signed in a 25-day period.
8-hour shifts?
8-hour shifts.
Okay.
Correct.
So how did that seem to you when you made that determination?
In my opinion, it seemed excessive and caused me to look into it further.
So now looking at the other chart for Alexander Hazelton and Robert Stark, can you explain that chart for us?
And so a similar chart was created for Robert Stark and Alex Hazelton, again reflecting their DOR shift dates and times. For Stark and Hazelton, this began on December 5th, 2018, and wrapped up on December 31st, 2018. Alex Hazelton, 10 shifts equaling 80 hours, and Robert Starks had 14 shifts with 112 hours. Those are the DORs signed by Officer Schwepke.
And for a total of how many hours?
192.
And again, these are 8-hour shifts?
Correct.
Now, based on this chart, how many DORs did FTO Schwepke sign during December 5th through December 31st?
I believe it was 24 shifts in a 27-day period.
Again, 24 8-hour shifts, correct? And how did that seem when you made that discovery?
Again, in my personal opinion, I felt it was excessive for that time period.
As you mentioned earlier that, seeing these charts and making these discoveries, it seemed excessive to you and it prompted you to look further, into this matter. What, if any, other investigation did you do regarding this?
I did do a Google name search for Officer Schwepke. It did return an article from the Hudson Valley 360 newspaper that reflected Officer Schwepke was being assigned full-time as a school resource officer for the Ravenna-Queens-Selkirk School District for the school calendar year 2018 school year, 18 and 19.
At this time, I'd like to mark for identification State Exhibit Number 10. Council should have a copy. Or Respondents Council, I should say. Mr. Mahaney, I'm showing you what has been marked as State Exhibit Number 10. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And what is it?
That is the article I just referenced from the Hudson Valley 360 newspaper.
At this time, I want to enter State Exhibit Number 10 into evidence.
No objection.
Okay. Exhibit 10 is admitted into evidence.
Thank you.
Okay, looking at this article that you just referenced, why was it of interest to you?
If you turn to page 3 of the article, the highlighted section. Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
The highlighted section states, also new this year will be a second school resource officer or SRO joining the staff. We have an Albany County Sheriff's Deputy joining us predominantly at the high school and at Becker. His name is Brian. Patty Bailey said, Officer Kevin Schwepke from the Queens Police Department will be stationed at the middle school and at Peter B. Both officers will be assigned full-time to the schools. They will be on school grounds all day, Bailey said. They are assigned 100% as school resource officers. Our number one biggest desire is for the kids to have a healthy relationship with law enforcement and rely on them in a positive way. The sheriff has been very forward-thinking and trying to assist us.
Okay, so based on this article that you just read, were there any DORs or daily observation reports signed by Officer Schwepke during a time when he was reportedly working full-time as a student resource officer?
Yes, I noted that there were 7 DORs out of the 24 from December 2018 that would have fallen during the day shift, 8 to 4, when Officer Schwepke is reportedly working full-time as an SRO.
So what, if anything, did you do next because of this?
So my next step was to reach out to Chief Contento at the Queens Police Department to advise him that the division was looking into a matter involving the falsification of supervised field training paperwork submitted by Officer Schwepke. During the course of our conversations, I had asked Chief Contento if he'd be willing to send me the time and attendance records for Officer Schwepke from June and July 2018 and December 2018.
And did you request any other information from Chief Contento?
I also asked him if he could provide me any information as to when Officer Schwepke would have been assigned as an SRO versus when he would have been on patrol assignment.
And how did Chief Contento respond to your request?
It was a prompt response. In fact, if I remember correctly, when we got off the phone, he sent me an email later that day with Queens Town PD time and attendance records. He also indicated in the email he provided information about Officer Schwepke's SRO responsibilities.
So it's fair to say that your request and the response was in writing.
Correct.
At this time, I would like to mark for identification State Exhibit number 12. Mr. Mahaney, I'm showing you what State Exhibit number 12. Do you recognize this?
It's the email from Chief Contento.
Okay, and this is regarding?
This specifically right here is regarding my request for the SRO information. Do you want me to read this? No?
Okay, we're discussing Exhibit 12.
12.
Exhibit 11, is that relevant?
At this
It's been
time,
stipulated,
not,
too.
yeah.
So we stipulate on 11 because it's in the record?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the ones that are doing right now are the ones that are not in the record.
Understand.
Trying to get them in.
Just want to make sure.
Okay, so this email is, you said you requested the SRO information, and you also requested Schwepke's time and attendance, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, other than the redactions in this email, is this an exact copy of the email exchange between you and Chief Contento?
Yes, it is.
At the time, I was to enter State Exhibit 12 into evidence.
No objection.
All right, Exhibit 12 is admitted. Thank you.
Now, looking at State Exhibit number 12, you asked Chief Contento for time and attendance records for June to July 2018 and December 2018. Why this time frame?
Because that time frame corresponded with the reported supervised field training for the 4 recruits: Arnold, Case, Hazelton, and Stark.
Is the supervised training conducted by?
By Officer Schwepke.
Did Chief Contento provide information on when Officer Schwepke was assigned as an SRO at the Central School District in Ravenna?
He did.
And what did he say?
He said in his email for June 2018, he was an SRO from June 1st to the 22nd. From the 23rd to the 30th, he was on regular patrol. For July 2018, he was regular patrol and worked primarily 8 to 4 and took several overtime shifts. December 2018, he was just regular patrol and worked where assigned.
After you read through his emails and the time attendance records, did you summarize your findings?
I did. So I created a chart again outlining Officer Schwepke's time and attendance versus when the 4 recruits were on supervised field training.
At this time, I'd like to mark for identification State Exhibit number 13. Respondent counsel should have a copy. Mr. Mahaney, State Exhibit number 13. Do you recognize this?
Yes, it's the outline that I just referenced regarding the DOR shift dates and times for the 4 recruits and Officer Schwepke's work hours.
And has this chart been changed since you created it?
It has not.
And is it the normal course of your business to summarize your findings?
It is.
To enter State Exhibit number 13 into evidence.
Mr. Dolbeck? I'm not sure if I need voir dire on this again. Let me check. No objection.
Okay, Exhibit 13 is admitted into evidence.
Okay, so State Exhibit number 13. Oh, wait. State Exhibit number 13 is in front of you. How did you create this chart? Or please explain this chart.
Sure. So I did a comparative analysis of the DOR shift dates and times for each recruit, along with Officer Schwepke's work hours, and also when he was assigned patrol versus being assigned as an SRO.
And that's SRO as a student resource officer.
Yes, sorry, school resource officer.
That's okay. Now, can you explain these color codes on this chart?
Yeah, so everything you see in yellow is when assigned DOR did not match the hours worked or conflicted with Officer Schwepke's work assignment based on information received from Chief Contento. The green you see represents the signed DORs by Officer Schwepke that did match up with the hours worked by him and when the recruits were going through their supervised field training.
Now, based on your review of all the documents, the time and attendance records, the DORs, when Officer Schwepke was assigned as a patrol at the Queens PD, or the student resource officer, and your chart that's in front of you, ended by the green highlights, how many shifts or hours did Officer Schwepke work during the same time or the same supervised field training period for the 4 recruits, Arnold, Case, Hazelton, and Stark?
Based on my analysis of the information provided, there were only 6 shifts or 48 hours that matched.
And what are the dates for those 6 shifts?
June 16th, 2018, June 28th, 2018, June 29th, 2018, December 11th, 2018, December 14th, 2018, and December 18th, 2018.
And what's the total number of hours of training for all the recruits based on the signed DORs by Officer Schwepke?
496 hours.
So 496 hours. How many DORs did Officer Schwepke falsely sign as the FTO?
Form of the question, for the record.
What's your objection?
Form of the question. It assumes a false signature. There was no false signature.
Can you rephrase it?
In your opinion, how many DORs did Officer Schwepke falsely sign as an FTO?
Did not falsely sign.
I said in his opinion. I didn't say he said that he did. In his opinion, how many?
He needs to make his opinion that they were falsely signed. That assumes facts, not in evidence. He needs to make his opinion that they were falsely signed. You can't make his opinion for him.
I didn't make it. That's what he thought. Based on his analysis, this is what he came up with. What did you determine, Mr. Mahaney?
That there were 56 shifts, 56 DORs. And I believe it was 448 hours total where Officer Schwepke was not working the times when the DORs were signed.
So after your conclusion, what, if anything, happened next?
So at this point, I summarized my findings and met with my supervisor and other executive staff to brief them on those findings. It was at that point that I had recommended that the division commence with the suspension and revocation of Officer Schwepke's Instructor Certification as well as his Field Training Officer Certification.
And did the division go through with that, commencing the suspension?
They did. They accepted my recommendation.
Okay. And did you notify Officer Schwepke of that decision?
I did.
How did you do that notification?
In a letter.
And is that letter State Exhibit number 1?
Yes.
Okay, and in this letter, what, if anything, did you write about supervised field training?
In part, in section 6020.3D of 9 NYCRR provides the supervised field training review and orientation, SFTRO, shall be conducted in accordance with the policies and minimum standards as established by the MPTC. These policies and minimum standards include, but are not limited to, those found within Section 4N of the Basic Course of Police Officers BCPO Guide. Section 4N states in part the following: the recruit officer should be allowed to perform all police skills where appropriate under the supervision of the field training officer, FTO.
Thank you. Now, all of this, when it all played out, as you mentioned, there were recruits involved. Were they affected by the role that Mr. Schwepke played?
They were. So at the time that we had sent out the notification for the suspension revocation to Officer Schwepke, the division also sent a letter to Chief Contento to advise him that the division was invalidating the certificates of completion for the BCPO for Arnold and Case. And because we hadn't yet issued the certificates of completion for Stark and Hazelton, that we were withholding until this issue could be rectified. I think it's worth noting that Commissioner Green allowed for a corrective action plan for Chief Contento to follow that would allow them to redo the hours of supervised field training that Officer Schwepke had signed off on, as long as they did that within a 6-month period.
Thank you. Now, going back to Officer Schwepke and being a field training officer, does one have to be certified to be a field training officer or FTO?
Yes, in fact, in 2015, this council approved the requirement to have certified FTOs who sign off on the daily observation reports and final summary evaluations.
And does one have to take any FTO training to become certified?
Yes, so this council, again, has standards established for the police field training officer course. I believe it's a 4-day course.
And did Officer Schwepke attend this training?
He did. Division records reflect that he completed that course in 2015.
And that training record you just referenced, is that what constitutes state exhibit number 14? That would be page
Yes, it is.
193.
Yes.
And what, if anything, is provided at this FTO training?
Each student should be given a student guide that includes, among other things, the role and expectations of FTOs throughout the supervised field training process.
In what other ways do we know that Officer Schwepke was made aware of the FTO's role?
On each of the DORs, you'll see at the top of the DORs, there's instructions on how to rate the recruit officer. And this is obviously there to guide the FTO on how to fill out that form.
And he signed it at the DORs, correct?
Yes.
Now I'm referring to you to state exhibit number 7. It is in your book on page 15. This is page 16. This is one of the DORs signed by Officer Schwepke. Can you read the instructions on that DOR?
The field training officer should rate observed behavior utilizing the scale which is described in the guide and outlined below. Written comments pertaining to the most and least satisfactory performance must be placed in the narrative section. Narrative comments can be provided for any behavior observed, however, are required whenever a rating of 2 or less, 6 or more, and NRT is given in any category. NO should be circled if behavior is not observed in a given area. A description of any remedial training provided, including the amount of time utilized, should be noted in the narrative section.
Thank you. So it's fair to say that pursuant to the MPTC standards, the FTO, or field training officer, is responsible for observing a recruit's conduct.
Correct.
So was Officer Schwepke signing of the DORs during shifts when he was working for the Queens PD in accordance with those standards?
When he wasn't working?
When he signed the DORs during shifts, when he wasn't working for Queens PD in accordance with those standards?
No, it was in direct violation of those standards.
And when the Queens PD recruits were directed to ride during that supervised field training component of the BCPL, or basic course for police officers, with different officers who were not Officer Schwepke, but Schwepke was the signatory on the DORs, was that in accordance with the MPTC standards?
No, it was not. It was in violation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mahaney. No further questions.
Do you have any other witnesses, Charlie?
No, that's it.
Mr. Delbeck?
Mr. Mahaney, you obviously conducted a very thorough investigation here. Now, you spoke to Chief Contento. Do you recall that?
I do.
And, of course, the Chief of Police runs the department. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. He directs the employees as to what to do?
Objection, I mean, to his knowledge, to your knowledge?
Based on my general knowledge of how the police department works, yes.
Right. And yet, when you had the conversation with Chief Contento, did he, when he offered you the DORs and sent them through the email, do you recall that?
Him sending them to me? Yes.
Yeah. Did you have, and you had a conversation, you said, before him to request that information, is that right?
Yes.
And you said the same day he sent you the emails, is that right?
I believe it was the same day.
During the course of that conversation, did he tell you that he directed Kevin Schwepke to supervise the FTO program?
I don't recall that.
Did he tell you that he created a schedule so that the individuals would ride with individual police officers, FTOs and non-FTOs? Did he tell you that?
No.
Did he provide you that schedule?
No, the only thing he provided is what was in the exhibit.
Did you ever ask him about Kevin Schwepke's role in supervising the FTOs?
Supervising the FTOs?
Yes.
No, I did not.
Did you ask him Kevin Schwepke's role as a police officer there in Coymans?
Only as it related to the SRO assignment based on the article I read.
Okay, so strictly on the article from the HV 360.
Correct.
Let me show you what is, what do we call the individual? Do we?
Respondents exhibit.
The Respondents Exhibit 1. If you'll forgive me, we didn't know how many people would be in attendance, so I think I've copied enough for everybody. If you can give the 3 to the council, and then 1 to Mr. Mahaney.
Do you have a means, Mr. Vinehout, to relay it to the 2 members?
We brought 5 copies. Huh? I don't know if we want to give these 2. We brought 5. We had no idea how many people would be here.
Council.
Mr. Delbeck, is this a document that, a record that you look to put into evidence?
Yes, we'd like to put it in evidence. I requested it be stipulated to. I'll ask counsel now if she's willing to stipulate to this as a record kept in the ordinary course of business from Chief Contento to his team. It's a schedule of recruit officers and who they would ride with throughout the month of December. It was sent to the team and has various relevant information that we'd like to get into evidence. I can't talk about until it's stipulated. Yeah.
We're going to refer to this as Respondents Exhibit 1.
Respondents 1, please.
Okay. Ms. Harvin?
I honestly, I can't follow the exhibit. I would like it to be explained more. Unfortunately, I can't stipulate to that. And it appears to be, a missing email. He's asking, it's a schedule and asking you, if you can't work, but I don't know where that response is. And then there's the schedule, so I don't know what was transpired in between.
Mr. Chairman, what we can do is I can have Mr. Schwebke testify on voir dire for Ms. Harvin. She can ask him questions about the document. We'll get it in.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to get it in.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Harvin, if you can ask questions. If you want voir dire.
Now, you're going to ask questions of who? Officer Schwepke?
Well, I'll ask. I'm offering the courtesy of Ms. Harvin to ask the questions so she can accept it into evidence.
Well, I would want to.
Swear in the witness.
Swear him in.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you under the penalty of perjury?
I do.
In your full name?
Kevin Schwepke.
Thank you. Go ahead.
It's difficult to ask questions on something that really it needs explaining. So, Mr. Schwepke, Chief Contento sent this email asking you, telling you this was a schedule for field training. And if you do not wish to do the FTO work, to let him know by 11/30/2018, correct?
That is correct.
And did you respond to Chief Contento?
I did not.
So by not responding, you did want to do the FTO work, correct?
Correct.
Now, can you explain this? And I must say, honestly, the dates were cut off, so I can't. I mean, I'm going to object to it anyway. I mean, so all the days are not on.
Just the shift
On there.
shift times.
So can you explain what the schedule is?
This is a December schedule that Chief Quintano put out for the month of December.
Okay. Can you explain further? I'm trying to follow.
On the top, the SSMTW.
I mean, not as far as the days. Like, I guess the shaded part. There's a lot of shaded area. It's saying the recruit and a corresponding FTO, which is you. I see a lot of shaded area.
For instance, on December 10th, it's a B is shaded. And in correlation, Stark also has a B shaded.
So for Stark and Hazelton, I'm assuming, because the names are cut off, Stark and Hazelton, all this shaded area at the bottom is when you worked and when you supervised the field training? I'm trying to spot them.
No, this is,
Can you?
this
I
is the
can't.
entire department schedule. Stark and Hazelton are field training during the month of December. So all their shifts are highlighted. And the shift, the corresponding highlighted shift above that, or for any other officer of that same day, would be who would be assigned by Chief Quintano to conduct field training for that officer. For instance, if you go to December 5th, Chief Quintano assigned Robert Stark a C line, and also he assigned Officer Decker
I see it.
to be his field training officer. And he also assigned an A line to Officer Hazelton, and subsequently Officer Ford was also highlighted, so he was assigned to be his field training officer.
So this schedule is showing the days that you actually worked. So essentially, the days that you worked.
These were the days I was assigned to work.
All right. I mean, I'm still going to object, but council is your ultimate decision.
Sure.
Well, may I speak, Mr. Chairman? The document is a monthly schedule put forth by the chief, assigning officers to ride with the recruit officers who are the trainees at that time. The shaded areas are the days and the shifts that those individuals were in the field during the time in question that the division alleges my client violated the rules of procedure and the rules of the BCPO. So it's put in evidence to demonstrate that this was driven by the chief. And that's it. That's all it is. It's the document the chief created. My reason to put it before Mr. Mahaney is to find out if he had been provided this document and if he'd had any conversation around it. The reason why we entered it at this time, I thought it had been stipulated to. Counsel had told me that my first email had cut off some of the pieces to it, so I sent her additional emails that were where some of the documentation wasn't cut off, but it certainly is legible, and it's a record kept in the ordinary course of business by the chief of police. My client was a recipient of it. He's verified and authenticated that he's been a recipient of it, and this is the procedure that followed. It's our exhibit, and it ties in with the DORs. All of these schedules ties in with the daily observation reports where the individuals were in the field with those particular officers. So it's perfectly relevant to the case and elucidates for the commission and the council, I'm sorry, what's happened. So that's why we've asked it to be entered.
Anything further, Ms. Harmon?
I'm fine. It's okay to go.
Just if it's okay with both councils, I'd like to probe this a little bit for some clarification. It appears to me as though on the 10th, 11th, and 18th, and 25th, then you were an FTO. Is that assigned as an FTO assignment officer?
That is correct.
That's correct. Now, the blank spaces after your schedule, were you working otherwise SRO?
I was not working as an SRO during the month of December for the town of Queens Police Department.
Okay, all right. And then finally, on the email that was sent out by the chief, are all the individuals on that list that he sent that to, are they all FTOs? It purports to be, once again, we have recruits attached to the schedule. If you don't wish to do FTO work, let me know. Are they all FTOs on that list?
No, sir.
They aren't?
No, sir.
Okay. Any other council members have questions?
So, to get to the point, you signed your name to the daily reports, but you did not supervise those officers on those days. Is that correct? Okay, your name appears on the daily observation reports.
I'm sorry, sir, for the dates that he was referring to, the 10th, 11th, and the 18th?
No, and the other ones that occur.
I did not, we supervised their field training, but I did not ride with them, no.
Okay, so you did not directly observe them? You did not directly...
I did not directly observe them.
Okay, you made comments about their appearance, you made comments about their behavior, and you did not directly see that?
I did not directly, no.
Okay. Do you see, and is that part of the guidelines that was taught in the supervised field training course?
Over the course of the field training, we went over the different categories in what those scores, and for instance, it would say appearance, and what a satisfactory appearance would appear to be, and a non-satisfactory or acceptable appearance would be.
But you did not observe them?
I did not.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, if I may add, we'll get that into the evidence shortly. The only reason I had this is for voir dire for the council.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Yes, Chief Brady.
So the B lines they show here, are you a full-time officer or a part-time officer?
For the month of December, sir, I was a part-time officer with the Town of Queens Police Department.
Okay. And these days that reflect B, what you had said you were working the road and you weren't an SRO during that course of December.
December 10th, 11th, and 18th. I was not an SRO in the month of December. I'm sorry.
Okay. So you were part-time. That's why it does not reflect the full.
That is correct, sir.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no objections, we'll admit Respondents Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Mr. Mahaney, have you ever seen this document?
No.
And Chief Contento gave you no indication that he created the schedule to have FTOs and non-FTOs ride with the recruit officers?
He did not, no.
Now, Mr. Mahaney, you're not making any allegation that Mr. Schwebke filed any false instruments or offered any false instruments, written documents, that he falsely signed any documents, are you?
You just told him he couldn't say such things. Now you're asking.
I didn't say, no, I said you couldn't say such things. He can say it, and I'll note for the record, he refused to say that my client falsely signed anything. There's no allegation on the table, I'll ask that there's no allegation on the table that my client falsely submitted any documents. Is that correct?
The allegation on the table is that he violated the standards of the MPTC as it relates to the supervised field training program.
Okay, we'll get to that. Did you ever look at the guidelines for the duties and chief of police of the town of Coiman?
I have not.
Objection. He's why would he?
It's part of his investigation. Is there a basis for the objection?
I'm irrelevant.
It's part of his investigation. You talked to the chief.
Asked and answered, part of the record. Proceed.
Now, when you got the DRIs from the chief, did you discuss his signatures on the completion pages?
Discuss with the chief?
Yeah, with the chief. His signatures on the pages showing the police, or that the individual recruit officer successfully completed the program.
Can you repeat the question?
Did you discuss with the chief why he signed the certificates of completion?
What are the certificates of completion?
I'll direct you to Exhibit 7. Okay, my Bates number, the page number that I have is 21. I believe it's 15 or 16 because of the alterations that were made in the records.
Does the record reflect that these are the daily observation reports you're referring to?
Yes, Exhibit 7, the first page of the Exhibit 7. Take a look at that.
So that is the final summary evaluation. It's not a daily observation report.
Right. It's a certificate review and certification. Is that right? Okay. It's a certificate of completion. Right.
Okay.
Is that right?
That's not what we would call it.
What would you call it?
It's the final summary evaluation that's required to be filled out by the agency head, the certified FTO, the academy director, and the recruit officer. This must come in with the class roster notification of completion from the academy.
Right. And you reviewed these. You reviewed these documents, correct?
I did.
You saw Chief Contento's signature on there.
I did.
Correct. Did you ask him why he signed this? And if he had any concerns about FTO Schwepke and his performance?
No, I did not ask him that.
In the DORs, if I could direct your attention to it might be easier if you look at my numbers are not the same. I'll use my numbers include all the exhibits that were not stipulated. So you bear with me for a second. Turn to the DRs. I think it's page 1. It might be page 156 for you.
You have a name?
I'll have to find it first.
Date?
Yeah. I'll have to match up with the calendar. 10th. December 16th. Dated December 16th, please.
Mr. Delbeck, what page are you on?
I'm trying to find, I've got the date of December 16th.
166.
166.
Thank you.
66?
Yes, that's the same as mine. Thank you.
16.
Oh, that's not. Okay. So December, is it Robert Stark?
Yes, the trainee of Stark.
So page 160.
Have you recognize the name of
Sorry.
Queen's officer Matos?
Excuse me?
You recognize the name Coiman's Police Department Officer Matos? Do you recognize that name?
I do not.
Did you have any conversation about him supervising any of the individuals?
I did not.
Did you have any conversation with the chief or anybody in your investigation about non-FTOs being assigned to fill out the DORs for these officers?
I did not. You
recall your testimony regarding the email of January 10th, 12:20 a.m. Do you recall your testimony as to that?
The AG, yes.
Yes. And the email stated that a female officer of 6 months had supervised. I'm sorry, that that a female officer who had only ridden for 6 months had supervised a recruit officer. Do you recall that in that email? Division's Exhibit 5.
Yes.
If I could direct your attention to Respondents 1. The female officer you're talking about there, you recognize the trainee recruit Arnold from June of 2018, Kelly Arnold?
I'm sorry, can you?
You recognize the name Kelly Arnold?
Yes, I do.
Okay, she was a recruit officer who was a trainee, according to your case here, in June of 2018. And on December 13th, I'm sorry, my math, yes, December 13th, it looks like she was assigned as a field training officer for a recruit officer.
Where's that?
On Respondents Exhibit 1. Sorry, I thought you had it in front of you there. See the December 13.
It's got an A.
It's got an A and it's shaded, is that correct?
It is shaded.
Okay, and you had the benefit of hearing the voir dire testimony of my client talking about the shading being when the recruit officers were assigned to ride in the field with.
You asked him to speak on a document he didn't create, nor that he...
No, but he heard the testimony.
That's fine, but he didn't create...
You recall I'm asking him if he recalls the testimony.
Recalls.
You recall that the shading represents when these officers were riding with a trainee?
I don't recall.
No, I recall, but I'm a little confused as to who's an FTO and who's a recruit officer on this.
The recruit officers are shaded at the bottom, Stark and Hazelton. Do you remember that testimony?
Okay.
Okay. They are shaded. The shading in the remainder of the other officers at Coymans indicates that they were riding in the field with that officer. On December 13th, during the A shift, it shows that Kelly Arnold was riding with Officer Stark.
I see that, yes.
Okay. And you never had any conversation at all that she was assigned, with Chief Contento assigned Officer Stark?
No, I did not.
Officer Arnold to... Look at that shaded area next to the in Respondents Exhibit 1, next to the shift assignments down that shaded. It says recruit and corresponding FTO officer. You see that?
Yes.
And a misspelling of corresponding as an indication of where it is. And then it indicates that.
Note that as well.
Yes, and it indicates their Officer Schwebke is FTO supervisor.
Well, it's a little confusing the way it's written. It says recruit and corresponding FTO officer Schwebke is FTO supervisor. So I can't tell FTO Officer Schwebke is FTO supervisor? Is that what that's saying?
Yes.
Okay.
It's clear from this that the chief intended Schwebke to supervise the FTO program.
Objection. He doesn't know his intent or what his intentions were.
Just asking for his interpretation.
It appears, yes.
I'll mark for identification what is presented as Respondents Exhibit 2 offered, and I only have, give this one to Natasha, and these two to the panel. Regretfully, I only made 3 copies, not knowing how many individuals were going to be here today.
Sure. Thank you. I'll just give you a moment to read Mr. Mahaney and Ms. Harvin.
It's a lengthy document. Which part do you want?
Just the first 2 pages. Mr. Mahaney, do you recognize that document?
I do.
Have you ever seen it?
Yes, I'm the author of that document.
Okay. Did you actually email it, or were you just the author?
I was involved in the dissemination. My staff was.
And whenever there is this, what is the document? Can you explain it to us a little bit?
It's a memo that is sent from the division to all law enforcement executives, so all police chiefs, sheriffs, commissioners, et cetera, across the state. We send memos out like this from time to time to advise them or as a refresher of what requirements are for certain courses. This one in particular, the subject is supervised field training, review, and orientation for police recruits, which is what we're talking about here today.
Okay. I noticed in the document you made a clear distinction there that if you look at this third paragraph, before I question, I'll ask it. Can we have it entered as respondents to as a document in the ordinary course?
Objections. Okay, this will be responded to exhibit number 2 is admitted.
Correct. Mr. Mahaney, in the third paragraph, in the last, second to last sentence, it says this component requires that the police recruit demonstrate his or her abilities in the presence of a qualified field training officer. Did you author those words?
I did.
Okay. The document you submitted the division submitted as the notice of hearing in Division's Exhibit 1 talks about the BCPO guide section 4N, stating that the recruit officer should be allowed to perform all police skills where appropriate under the supervision of a field training officer. Do you recall reading that?
Yes.
Okay. And this document indicates a change in the definition of supervision, does it not?
I'm not following you.
Well, you made it clear there that the FTO now has to be in the presence, a certified FTO has to be in the presence of the trainee. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that was motivated by the events of this case. Isn't that true?
This memo?
This memo.
Not necessarily this case.
Were there other cases around the state?
We have had other issues with supervised field training across the state.
And the next sentence says effective January 1, 2015. Okay, this document is dated July 22nd, 2019. So you're saying effective January 1, 2015, any officer assigned to the conduct SFTRO must have completed MPTC approved by police FTO course. You see that sentence there?
That's correct.
Okay, so you're making clear that this is that this particular document is retroactive to January 1, 2015.
It's reminding all the law enforcement executives that this council had established a standard back that went into effect January 1st, 2015.
Yeah, well, what is that standard? You're talking about the supervision of a field training officer. We're boiling this down. This is in essence, the definition of what supervision is here today. Is that right?
Correct.
And supervision doesn't necessarily mean direct observation, does it?
It can mean other things.
Do you intend, to the extent of your powers, Mr. Mahaney, since you're the author of the Respondents Exhibit 2, do you intend to have
The words that we just read in the third paragraph, that this component requires that a police recruit demonstrate his or her abilities in the presence of a qualified field training officer. Do you intend to amend the BCPO guide to include those words in the presence of?
But, Coach Jackson, what does that have to do with today's hearing? That's irrelevant. We're talking about Officer Schwepke and what he did and did not do.
It's perfectly relevant. We just had testimony that supervision does not necessarily mean direct observation. All of a sudden, July 21, 2019, a document goes out that says we need FTOs to be in the presence of their trainees. It's perfectly relevant. I'm asking strictly for a ruling on the objection, whether or not he can answer the question.
Let me understand that the question is, does he intend to change something in the future?
Well, I'm asking if he has if he has any knowledge or if he has any power to change the BCPO guide that's out there that does not contain that language to now contain the language in the presence of.
Just to be clear, what is the language in the guide? I don't have the guide in front of me.
Neither do I. My question. That's my question to you. That's all I'm asking.
So he can't. It's something he can't.
Well, let him answer the question.
I'm objecting, but go ahead.
Well, we need a ruling.
Well, yeah, I note the objection for the record, but I think you can answer that.
So, updating a curriculum established by this council would fall outside of my responsibilities. That would fall to my counterparts in program services for the Office of Public Safety. Fair enough.
If the chair will bear with me for just a moment. If I can direct everyone's attention to Divisions Exhibits 8 and 9.
What numbers, I'm sorry?
8 and 9, please.
Before we go there, you want to?
I'm sorry.
You want respondents number 2 to?
Yes, if there's no stipulation, we'd like it in the record. There was no objections.
Any objection, Mr. Okay. Okay, respondents number 2 is admitted. Is both councils done with respondents number 2?
Yes, I'm moving on.
I have a question from one of the council members, Chief.
I don't know if this is new, so I don't know if this is appropriate. But I think there's confusion as to the purpose of this document. So I wanted to ask you a question.
Sure.
This document that's provided by respondent, you authored, you said effective January 1, 2015, any officer assigned. This document is not retroactively changing any type of, you were reminding law enforcement administrators that is in place at that time. So this was a reminder sent out that this was in place.
Correct.
You are not retroactively putting something into place. And I want to be clear, is that correct?
That is correct, yes. It was a reminder.
Okay, so based on Chief Parisi's question, let's go back to that. So why is January 1, 2015 significant?
Because any daily observation reports completed on or after that date must be signed by a certified FTO, meaning they had to complete the MPTC FTO course.
Okay. And that's just, is that in the legislation? Is that it? Is that when the legislation, the guide came out?
That is when they approved the effective date of that requirement.
Okay. And that requirement is found where? Is that?
Where can you find that requirement?
Yes.
It's in the BCPO lesson plans for the supervised field training program.
Okay.
Section 4M.
A moment, please. Just another minute here, Mr. Mahaney. In looking at Divisions Exhibit 8 and 9, at the bottom of 8, Kelly Arnold, 18 shifts, 144 hours. You see that?
Yep.
It says there are remaining 16 hours covered by another FTO.
Correct.
What does that mean?
That means there were other DORs signed by another certified FTO.
Okay.
Equaling 16 hours.
And similarly on Divisions 9 with Stark and Hazelton at the bottom.
Yep.
Covered by 2 other FTOs. That you knew those are signatures. Okay.
Have a question?
Yes. Oh, he answered it.
Oh, I didn't hear. Okay.
So, based on your testimony in the DRs that we have here today, there's nothing that states that Kevin Schwepke had to directly observe the officer that day in order to sign these documents. Is that correct?
To the contrary, he did have to observe. That is in the rating instructions on the DOR.
That he had to directly observe?
Correct.
And the rating instructions are where?
Top of the DOR.
Top of the page, right at the DOR. The officer should rate observed behavior. Is that what you mean?
Correct.
That doesn't say directly observe the behavior. He's rating the observed behavior. If he had a delegated officer, if the chief had delegated an officer to ride in the field, then he's met the standards. Isn't that right?
Not unless they're a certified FTO.
Well, so the chief who assigned a non-certified FTO, okay, to ride in the field, that's his responsibility. Is that right?
It's whose responsibility?
The chief's.
It's a responsibility of the signatory on this form to rate the observed behavior.
Right.
And you must be a certified FTO to sign this form.
Correct. Now, first, you made 2 statements there. He rates the observed behavior. Okay. Let's go to the second statement. Kevin Schwepke, as far as you know, is a certified FTO. Is that right?
Yep.
And in all these forms, he's rating observed behavior. Correct?
Not according to my analysis. He was not even working. So how could he observe the behavior?
Well, it doesn't say that he had to observe it. It's the observed behavior. It doesn't mean that he had to directly observe it.
That is not the intent of this supervised field training program.
Thank you. I'll turn the witness over for redirect if necessary.
Mr. Mahaney, going back to the last question, what is the intent?
That each recruit is supervised by a certified FTO and that they're given the opportunity to demonstrate their performance and behavioral skills in the presence of that FTO, certified FTO.
And has the division ever authorized an FTO to not be certified and complete these supervised field trainings?
No, that would be in violation of the standards established by this council, effective January 1, 2015.
So how many hours are there for the supervised training?
At a minimum, there's 160.
And so if a person who was not certified did do the supervised training, what would happen with that 160 hours? Does it count? Does the hours count?
It would not count. They would have to redo those hours.
So it would benefit someone to sign these DORs if they weren't a certified FTO.
Objection. It would benefit who? Okay.
Now going back, Mr. Mahaney, respondent asked you questions about Chief Contento, whether you, received, certain documents, and then did you ask for certain documents? What was your main concern in this matter? Who was your main concern in this matter?
My main concern was to stay within the scope of the written complaint, which stated that there was alleged falsification of supervised field training paperwork. So to me, that means the daily observation reports. So that was my main focus, was to see what recruits possibly were affected by that and who the signatory was on those DORs.
And who was the signatory on the DORs?
Again, the primary signatory was Officer Schwepke.
No more. Okay. Anything further?
Yes, just a couple things on recross, and we'll be done. Again, you stated the intent was that the recruit officers complete their training in the presence of, and that's reflected in your July 21, 2019 statement. Is that right?
Correct.
And also you discussed you were asked about what would happen if what would have to be done if this was not done correctly and it needed to be redone. Is that right? Yes. And that has happened, right? You contacted Chief Contento. That has been done, and it's currently in the process or it's near completion. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Oh. And you contacted the chief to fix that problem, right?
We sent him a letter.
I know.
All set? All set?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Harvey? Anything further, Mr. Nolan?
No, we'd like to put on a witness or two, if that's okay with the council.
That's fine. Are you okay with that? He'd like to address some other witnesses.
Yes.
Okay.
Before I do that, may I make an opening statement as council did for the division? Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay. Just quickly, Mr. Chairman and Chief Parisi and Dr. McBride. We've all heard the saying, nothing good ever happens after midnight. 12:20 a.m., an email from somebody, we don't know who it is, but goes out as a complaint. You stated earlier, Mr. Chairman, that substantial evidence is the standard here today. And the Court of Appeals has told us that means such relevant proof that an ordinary reasonable mind would believe could lead to an ultimate fact. Rationality is what is reviewed under the substantial evidence rule. That's the Court of Appeals. It cannot be bare surmise.
Are you making an argument or closing or opening statement?
I'm making an opening statement. My apologies. It cannot. The Court of Appeals has told us it cannot be bare surmise. I'm just summarizing and reflecting on what was provided to us from the chair. It can't be bare surmise and conjecture. There's three reasons, and as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, there's no. It's a low bar. There's no rational basis to decertify Kevin Schwepke as a field training officer. The first two should handle this, but the first being that the chief scheduled the recruit officers to ride in the field. He assigned his part-time police officer. Kevin Schwepke was part-time. He's full-time at Manans. He assigned his part-time police officer to handle the administration of the FTO duties as the field training officer supervisor. Due to the staffing issues, and you'll get a little bit of a testimony about that today, the chief had to assign non-FTOs to ride. And he assigned some very experienced, highly respected officers, 30 plus years, to ride with these individuals who are not certified FTOs. And they reviewed the documents They filled out the documents, reviewed that with the FTO supervisor, Kevin Schwepke. And if he did not need to amend the document, for example, if there were numbers misplaced or the ratings were done wrong or if there were grammar errors, he would sign off on daily observation reports that were written by other people. It's pretty clear. He had no intent. He was fully transparent. He did it as directed by the chief of police for the town of Coymans. And he signed those documents separately as the FTO supervisor, unless he was the one who was directly observing that individual. He was signing as the writing officer. Again, we go back to the testimony of Mr. Mahaney. Nowhere in the regs and guidelines does it define exactly that supervision means direct observation. It doesn't mean that in the law, and it doesn't mean that in these documents. All of a sudden, in July of 2019, after this starts up, there's a document out there talking about individuals being in the presence of FTO supervisors. And that makes perfect sense. I'll introduce you to Kevin Schwebke. He's 35 years old. He'll be 36 in December, and I've completed 14 years as a police officer. He's developed a reputation of being very reliable, very diligent, and that's the reason why, as a part-time officer in Coymans, that he was assigned FTO supervisor duties. He's had extensive certification training, as you know, from, Divisions Exhibit 14, 19 different certifications, 22 different trainings, including his FTO over 4 years ago and over the 14 years. He's employed full-time in the Manans Police Department, I believe as a detective. As an officer, my apologies. And as I said, he's established his reputation as a reliable police officer. I mentioned the email that came in at 12:20 a.m. You heard the timeline of events through 6/5 when my client was notified of the hearing. And what you will further hear is testimony about from the prior chief, and the current chief has obviously taken that role and continued on, that they schedule the ride-alongs with the recruit officers. And that you'll hear that Kevin Schwebke never assigned a ride-along to a non-FTO. He never assigned a ride-along to anybody. It wasn't his job. He reviewed the daily observation reports with the officer, if he wasn't the officer himself, and he signed as the FTO supervisor if that officer was not an FTO, because there was a place on the form to sign. You'll hear testimony today from the prior chief, Peter J. McKenna, regarding his conversations and his understanding of this and why it was done this way. Bottom line is, Kevin Schwebke performed as directed by the chiefs, the current chief, who is also an FTO, by the way, and he did his due diligence. In fact, from the testimony you heard initially, you'll hear testimony that when he was off duty, he was doing his FTO work and not getting paid for it because as a part-time officer. So the real issue's been addressed with the chief. It's been ameliorated, so there's no rational basis to go after Kevin Schwebke, and that's what we intend to show. My first witness will be P.J. McKenna. He's the former chief, and I'd ask that he be sworn in.
Mr. McKenna, do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you under the penalty of perjury?
I do, sir.
You can proceed.
Chief McKenna, how long have you been in law enforcement?
It was just under 25 years when I left, sir.
And had you always been in the town of Coymans?
No, sir.
Where?
Prior to that, I was a detective and a sergeant and a detective sergeant in the city of Albany.
How long were you the chief at Coymans?
3.5 years, sir.
And you had the benefit of hearing the testimony here today. What is your, while you were there for the 3.5 years, did you administer a field training officer program?
Yes, sir.
And Can you give a general outline to the chairman and the council as to how it operated in Coimans when you were there?
Yes, sir. As you can imagine, with small departments, especially part-time departments, you're kind of moving pieces to keep everything going. At the time I was chief, we ranged from anywhere from 5 to 2 full-time officers, and the rest of the shifts were filled with part-time police officers. Those officers came through the academy or were retired officers or were officers who were picking up part-time work from other departments such as Manans or Albany County Sheriff. As we move forward, we were always looking for ways to make sure that we were adequately staffed. It's not official, but small departments are very often training departments where officers will come in, they'll work, and they'll take civil service exams in order to get full-time employment elsewhere because small towns just can't afford it. So one of the things we did was look for ways to keep the chains moving, for lack of a better term. And we were employing field training officers from other agencies who were working part-time for us. And then we were fortunate enough to get Kevin, who actually asked me to send him to FTO school. And although he was a part-time officer, he was dedicated full-time to the department. And so I sent him. He went on his own dime. He was sponsored by us. And subsequently, he became one of our field training officers, and really the only one that was there available full-time for us, other than Sergeant Contento. So from there, we looked at ways to try and manifest what we had as a means to train who we were getting. Back in January of 2018, I can't believe it was a year and a half ago, I was chief of police, and we had a recruit which had just come out. Went to the sheriff's office one day after they came out, and we had a couple officers who transferred to larger departments, 2 to Albany. One went to Schenectady. We were pretty depleted, so I looked for ways to prepare when the next set of recruits were coming out. My review of the documentation, and I, full disclosure, was never a field training officer. In fact, I came on before the FTO program was initiated. First started in 1992. Was to try and find a way to get officers trained and available when they came out of the academy. And one of those ways was to create a supervising FTO, which I had put on Kevin's shoulders. I asked him to look over the program. I reviewed the documentation, and it was my interpretation that nowhere did I see the words, and this is where I came up, direct observation. So it was my idea to use the officers that we had in place, some officers with 30 years, some who were actually my bosses, as field training officers, and have them report to Kevin, who would then work with those officers as a means of determining, what did you observe, what did you see, where would you put them, and using those observations, documenting it as the supervising FTO. So that's where we came to be at this point.
Did you ever place a call to the DCJS or any of the training authorities in the area, forgive me for my lack of knowledge of those, and ask about the FTO program and how you were operating in Coimans?
I regret to say I did not contact DCJS. I did reach out to Zone 5, and again, this was in either 2017 or 2018, speaking to people up there about spitballing the way to get a field training officer available for the number of recruits that we were trying to push through. And I don't know who I spoke to, but I went back and forth with, well, what if it doesn't say directly observation? Is it possible to have somebody supervise it if it's a police officer? And that was one of the means we looked at keeping the department alive and keeping the FTO program going with the lack of manpower that we had.
And what was their response when you talked to the people at Zone 5?
Again, I don't remember who I spoke to, but they thought it was a viable option. They directed me to do more research on it. To my delinquency, I actually moved on to another job probably 4 or 5 months later, but I did start to investigate, and I did put the wheels in motion to implement a possible plan for that. And I also informed Sergeant Contento at the time to look into this about using, based on what I'm reading, a supervising FTO instead of not having the manpower to observe 2 or 3 or possibly even 4 recruits, because unlike a larger department which has a lot of officers at their disposal. We don't even have more than 2 officers at a shift sometimes just 1.
Okay, so for the purposes of this hearing, sometimes those officers on the shift that you described as experienced or from other, retired from other agencies and with you, were not trained FTOs?
No, that's correct.
And you directed Kevin to supervise it in the manner and form, as you understand from the testimony today?
Yes, sir.
So when he was signing a DOR and somebody else had observed that individual for that particular DOR, in what capacity was he signing it?
The formula was to have Kevin reach out to the officer who was doing the field training at the time, who was riding or working with the other recruit for 8 hours. Get their observations, get their input, what did they do right, where are they deficient, where are they positive, how did they do with this, and how did they do with that. And as a certified FTO, he completed the forms based on his conversations with the officers who did the riding and did the training.
Just a moment, please. You mentioned Sergeant Contento.
Yes, sir.
Is he now the Chief Contento?
No, he's not.
Okay. Who is the chief at Queens?
There is an officer in charge in Queens now. There is no chief of police.
At the time of the this last summer, earlier this summer, was David Contento the chief, or Daniel Contento?
He was appointed acting chief, which is the person who assumes responsibilities of chief of police pending civil service exam. And at this point, I don't believe he has been elevated.
Okay. Is he still acting chief?
He is.
Okay. Forgive me. Appreciate it. I have no further questions for the witness.
Mr. McKenna.
Yes, ma'am.
You stated that you had Mr. Schwepke sign the DORs as a field?
No, the
You
plan.
do that?
I'm sorry. The plan was to have a supervising FTO, and the supervising FTO, because I didn't have enough bodies to do it, was to speak to the officers, and then once he received those observations, then he would fill out the form. So then, yes, he would sign the form.
And isn't it correct that the DORs have no space for a supervised field training officer to sign? It only has the field training officer space for their signature?
Yes, ma'am. To the best of my knowledge, that's correct.
And isn't it correct that the DORs state that the field training officer should rate observed behavior?
Could I check one of them? Thank you. Could I ask you to repeat that question again, ma'am?
The DORs state that the FTO, the field training officer, should rate observed behavior.
No, ma'am, it doesn't say that. It says they should rate observed behavior. Yes, ma'am.
And you mentioned before that you never contacted DCJS.
No, I did not.
You contacted Zone 5?
Yes, ma'am.
Why would you contact Zone 5?
Because that's where the recruits were, and I was looking to prepare for them coming out because we had potentially more bodies than FTOs.
So you never contacted DCJS to address your concerns with the issues that you have in your department?
No, ma'am.
Now, you were chief of Queens.
Yes, ma'am.
At a certain time. Can you tell that time frame again?
I believe it was October of 2014 until sometime in February of last year, ma'am.
So 2014 to 2018.
Yes, ma'am.
So you were chief of police when the NPTC standards that a person had to be a certified FTO were in effect.
Was that the memo that we were just talking about the effective January 1?
Just their standards. You were chief of police at that time when it was standard practice for there to be a certified FTO signing the DORs or supervising the training?
Based on the conversations that I've heard here, yes, I believe so. If that's the January 1, 2015 that we're discussing previously, then yes, I was chief of police from that time forward.
So you were chief then. Let's come back to present day. You were not the chief of police during the times when the 4 recruits, Case, Arnold, Hazelton, and Stark, were going through their supervised training, correct?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Now, Mr. McKenna, I know you're here. You're a fellow officer.
Retired,
former law enforcement officer. Mr. Schwepke is also a law enforcement officer.
Yes, ma'am.
I understand, you know, the code, law enforcement officer code.
Objection. What? Is there a code? Is there a code?
Withdrawn.
Is there a code? There's some officers in the gallery.
Withdrawn. So your fellow law enforcement officer. It's not the first time you've been in a situation when you tried to assist another fellow officer when they were allegedly in trouble, is it?
No, ma'am.
So do you recall a time where you tried to assist another fellow law officer, George McNally?
No, ma'am.
You don't recall?
I did not assist George McNally, and I made no effort to assist Mr. McNally.
Okay, I would like to introduce into evidence. State exhibit will be probably number 15 at this point. Showing Mr. McKenna. Do you remember this, Mr. McKenna?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Oh, he's not going to testify to the document. The document's not in evidence.
Oh, is it? I mean, it's not. We're not adhering to the strictures of evidence. But But Officer McKenna, do you recognize? What's
Objection.
about?
This is two things. This is outside the scope of direct.
It's not outside the scope. It's going to his credibility.
It's outside the scope of direct. He came here to speak about his role as the chief of police in the town of Coymans and what they did in the FTO program. His direct testimony was limited to that. There's absolutely no reason to go to a Times Union article and discuss speculation from a Times Union article about my client's behaviors ever in the past.
It's not speculation. I mean, he was found guilty of things. It's not speculation.
Who was found guilty?
So, according to the article,
who was found guilty?
Mr. McKenna.
Mr. McKenna was not found guilty of anything.
If you're fired, yes, you're found guilty of doing something, and it goes to his credibility.
There's no firing does not mean you were found guilty of anything. We all know that.
Well, your objection is noted for the record. You're apparently probing on the credibility of the witness. I'll let you
Because he doesn't remember.
No, I'll let you proceed to ask the question.
Isn't it true, Mr. McKenna, that you were terminated after you were found guilty by an arbitrator on disciplinary charges?
From the Albany Police Department. Yes, ma'am, that is true.
And these allegations that you were, fired, the allegations stem from allegations that you were trying to prevent the arrest of another officer who was later convicted of DWI?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
I'd like to enter into evidence, state exhibit number 15.
Object. Testimony's been made about his role in the past. There's no need for an article. There's no proof in the article.
You want to introduce that as an exhibit?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I haven't even seen the exhibit yet.
I haven't seen the exhibit either.
I can give it to you. I gave it to him. I thought he was going to show it to you.
He's a witness.
That's all right. Go ahead.
All right, look good.
Thank you. No, it's not. I mean, my objection remains the same, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff Spike, I still object to the article being entered. It's an article. My client has testified. He's testified truthfully to what's going on. There's no need to.
1 and 3 here also. 5 pages there, there's only 2 here.
So this is.
I'm sorry, Mr. It appears to only be 2 pages of a 5-page article.
Well, you can note that it's the complete article by, you can read it. It's a complete article.
Actually, it moves on. It's cut off. A sentence is cut off, so it's not the complete article.
Well, here's a complete article. I like that. Sorry.
So you're going to introduce the complete article? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, take a look at that, Mr. Dahlbeck. And
I just renew my objection, but I leave it at the feet of the council, in the council's hands, whether it's entered or not. I renew the objection. He's testified to the questions, and
well, your objection is noted for the record. The relevance of this can be determined by the council as to how much weight they want to give to it or not. But I'll admit exhibit. What's the number? What's the exhibit number?
We state 15.
15. Okay. Exhibit 15 is admitted. Anything else, Ms. Harvin?
No, that's it.
Okay. Dahlbeck?
oh, sure, just a little redirect. If I may take a second. Oh, one second. Chief McKenna, I'm not sure how to ask this, and I'll beg council's indulgence, but are there, when you have a subordinate in a police department, they need to obey your orders, generally, is that right?
They are required to answer and respond to every lawful and moral order.
Okay. Are there reasons they can disobey an order?
If it is unlawful or immoral.
And along the lines when being questioned when you were, the time that you were the chief on cross-examination, when you were the chief at the town of Coymans, did you create a calendar such as this with, okay. And did it look somewhat similar to this?
Yes, sir.
And did it have recruit officers riding with non-FTOs and FTOs?
I'd have to go through the records to know for certain, but to the best of my knowledge, I can't answer that directly.
Was it your understanding that some recruit, I don't want to rehash your testimony, but some recruit officers rode with non-certified FTOs?
That was the plan. When I was chief at some points, we had up to 5 officers. So we lost a number of FTOs at one point, and I was trying to formulate forward. Previously, it's possible, but I can't state directly that we had anyone riding who was not with an FTO because we didn't have that many recruits coming out for the first 2 years. It was 1 at a time. This was a larger class of 3.
In regards to the cross-examination regarding the newspaper article, did the town of Corymans hire you after you had left Albany PD?
Yes, sir.
Were they aware of the situation reflected in the newspaper article?
Yes, sir.
And they still hired you?
They hired me as a police officer first, and then they hired me as the chief of police about a year and a half after that.
And did you leave town of Corymans on good terms?
Yes, I did.
When you were the chief, were you familiar with the guidelines of the BCPO?
To be honest, no, not as familiar as I should have been.
And when you say not as familiar as you should have been, do you expect that Chief Contento should be familiar with the...
Well, Sergeant Contento is an FTO, so I would assume he's a little bit better versed in it than I am, and so I would say yes.
Okay. You mentioned Chief Contento being an FTO himself. Does he have other training duties that you know of?
Other training duties?
Is he involved in any training at the academy?
Well, he previously actually was a camp counselor. Camp counselor sounds like a summer camp, but every academy class has a counselor who is the head of the class. I sponsored Dan to be the counselor at the Zone 5 Academy for a session. I'm not going to get the number right, but it was about 3.5 years ago.
No further questions. Pass the witness.
Ms. Harvin, do you have any other questions for this witness?
One moment, counsel. No further questions.
No further questions. Listen, we've been at this for 2 hours. I would like to take an adjournment for about 10 minutes, and then we can return and you could continue with your witnesses. Mr. Delbeck, Ms. Harvin's okay? All right, this hearing is adjourned for 10 minutes.
See it is that they allow people to. So they allow people to supervise.
Water. I'm being serious.
I mean, obviously you can see the chief must have put this out, and he's made him the supervisor, but again, he's relying on.
As soon as I get the nod from Josh. Okay, we'll proceed now. Thank you for your testimony, Ms. McKenna. And Mr. Delbeck, do you have other witnesses?
No, sir. We're going to rest at this time.
You're going to rest at this time?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Harvin, anything further? All right. Does any of the council members have any questions that they would like to follow up on at this time?
I guess I'll follow up on my original question. It may have been out of place, but the question still stands. Basically, it appears that the way this worked at Queemans is that you were the overall supervising field officer.
That's correct.
And then when people, were riding with other officers, the other officers would inform you as to their deportment, what they did, and then you signed off on it?
Absolutely. We would discuss deficiencies and areas of strength. We set a plan to move forward, and deficiencies.
But there's a lot of entries that are in the exhibit where there's no evidence, nothing where a person was acting as a, sub FTO. I mean, it appeared that you were there.
My apologies, sir. I don't understand your question.
Well, okay. So on some of the sheets on the daily observation reports, you're there. I mean, you sign your name saying that you were there, and that based on the other exhibits, you weren't there. You were working someplace else.
I did the days that I believe you're referring to, for instance, December 10th and 11th.
Right.
That I was there those days, correct. And see, other days I was not in direct supervision.
You weren't even at the department, though. I guess that's where my issue is.
It's possible I was not at the department.
Okay.
I believe there could be issues, dates that I was a school resource officer, working for the town, but still not in direct supervision.
Okay, thank you.
So as the FTO supervisor, how do you define your role?
I was directed to talk to the officers that were riding along with the recruit officers, and discuss areas of deficiencies, and discuss, systematically performance areas and behavioral, as the DORs reflect here, of what they observed of their behavior, and come up with a plan if they needed, assistance in a certain area, or there was something that they possibly were continuously not observing due to the nature of the calls. We would assign homework or additional duties outside of the scope of their field training to make sure that they experience that, the aspect of the police role.
So you were relying on, and some occasions you were relying on the officers that were accompanying the recruit, their observations to be reported to you as far as their behavior and how they operated.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So then, and Respondents Exhibit 1, where it says you are the FTO supervisor, did you determine the schedule on who was with who and who the recruit was with, or did the chief do that?
The chief did that, sir. I had no input on the assignments.
Okay. All right. Chief, anything?
A couple questions. You work part-time for Coymans, correct? And you're full-time in Manans?
That's correct, sir.
So, knowing the arrangement or this process for field training, and having gone through the field training officer curriculum and program, did you have any concerns with this setup process? No, so I understand, I'm a chief in 15 years, and I understand you do what you're told from a chief. But on the other hand, I also know that did you have any concerns that this operation, the way this was being done, do you have concerns that a 6-month, you are getting information from a 6-month employee to determine the fitness of another employee that is a recruit? Did you have concern with that? Not in every situation, but that 6-month employee that just went through or is going through, do you have concern with that? And if you did, 2 points to the question, did you voice any concern to the chief respectfully as can be done?
Well, as I mentioned, I didn't have any control over who they were scheduled with, so I respectfully accepted who they assigned them to be with. And moving forward, if I thought that possibly an individual with 6 months on the job that was acting as or was riding with them and delegating to me what they observed, I might have taken that into consideration when when it notifying the next person that they work with of their deficiencies. But the way that the process was explained to me, I was under the understanding that it was a viable option and accepted practice. And I didn't have no knowledge that it was incorrect.
Were you concerned with it?
I was not concerned. I assume that many agencies were operating under the same understanding.
Okay.
Were you ever ordered to sign a DOR?
Ordered
by the chief?
I was instructed that I would complete the DORs, correct? Yes, sir.
Okay. Chief Zach or Professor Clovis, do you have any questions?
I do not.
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Chief.
I guess I would ask, is Chief McKenna still present?
Yes.
I guess my question would be for the chief, the former chief. Was Officer Schwepke's conduct, the way you guys were running your field training officer program, was this sanctioned by you, that everyone understood what was happening here, or was Officer Schwepke acting on his own in filling out these DORs? This was sanctioned by the department to run your field training officer program this way?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay, my second question would be for Officer Schwepke, would be, when you went to FTO school, was there any confusion in your mind? Because I've been to FTO school and I've been to that training, that at any time you were under the understanding that somehow signing those DORs was not to be activity that you personally observed. I've gone to the school. And when they teach you to do a DOR, when you sign off on a DOR, to me it was always clear that that activity would have to be supervised personally. You're saying you were unclear of that direction when you received that training?
That is correct, sir.
I have nothing else.
Okay, thank you. Any other concerns or questions? I would like to refer to respondents number 2 on the third paragraph, where it says, this component requires that a police recruit demonstrate his or her abilities in the presence of a qualified field training officer. Effective January 1, 2015, any officer assigned to conduct the SFTRO shall have completed an MPTC-approved police FTO course. Just to put that into the record. Okay, before we close, do you have any closing statement, Mr. Delbeck or Ms. Harvin?
Other than the evidence speaks for itself.
The evidence speaks for itself, sir?
I'd like to make a brief closing statement and thank the chairman and the respected council and members of the DCJS who are here. That I think some of the questions asked were whether Kevin was concerned about what was going on a day-to-day basis. It should be noted, and the evidence reflects this, so I'm not talking about anything that's not already in evidence. Kevin signed because he was the FTO when a non-FTO was riding with somebody. He reviewed that document that was filled out by the riding officer. Okay, so he reviewed it. He made any corrections if the riding officer didn't fill out the document properly. So that was his role as the FTO, because he understood the DORs. He understood how they were supposed to be filled out. And he did everything at the direction of his chief and the prior chief. He was diligent, and he never intended to defraud or violate any policies. He never intended to falsify any documents, which he did not, as we state here today. We think he should remain certified, and I think the balance of the evidence shows there's no substantial evidence, there's no rational basis to take Kevin's certification away when the chief himself, or I'm sorry, the acting chief, Sergeant Contento at this time, is an FTO himself who has the authority of the chief and is ordering my client to do this work. Make no mistake about it, he's here because he did his job.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that ends the proceeding as I can see here, and so I would ask that one of the council members requests that we go into executive session to deliberate. I have a motion for executive session. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, we'll now have an executive session. And Chief Sartell, are you on the phone? Not sure. Okay.
Really good.
Anybody?
That's okay.
Sorry.
They're waiting.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, is everybody, Josh, I had to wait for Josh to come back in. Okay, thank you. I've accepted the motion to come back out of executive session and to go back into open session. The council members have met and discussed the issue. There is substantial evidence that Officer Schwepke failed to adhere to the established regulations. Therefore, the council recommends that the certification be revoked. He had an obligation to follow the January 1, 2015 compliance memoranda. However, we would like to make a comment that the agency involved here certainly violated the spirit of the FTO purpose and program. So it is regrettable that the only sanction is against this FTO, Officer Schwepke. The council directs that DCJS give notice to the chief of that agency and remind them again as to what the regulations are for proper FTO purpose and program. In these contemporary times, we must have fully prepared police officers doing public safety on our streets. And so the FTO program is very important that it be followed as established. That is the ruling of the council, and we will move on to additional action items herein. As I understand it, Chief Zach, you have to leave for another appointment? Oh, he said, okay, he had to go. All right, we remain. There's 4 council members. We still have a quorum present. Thank you, gentlemen, for everything today, and we'll go from there. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the 246th meeting, which was in June of 2019. And if there are no additions or amendments, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion made. Second. Second, Chief Parisi. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved, same. Motion is carried. All right, the next item is the basic course for police officer updates. Josh Weinhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. the essence of time, I'm going to try to be relatively quick here.
Can I put the slide here?
During the development of the Essentials of Response and Investigative Skills section, we consolidated several modules of instruction into one cohesive unit. And as you recall, it was adopted in March of 2019. Among that consolidation, the media relations section that was covered in the current community policing and media relations section was removed and included in that new unit of instruction. The removal of this piece was a better fit for the new unit that covered the fundamental skills of handling an incident, which include how to address when the media is present, how to work with the media, that type of background, that fundamental skill. As a result, the remaining community policing and media relations curriculum section focused only on community policing. So acknowledging with the advances in technology supported by crime analysis, the rapid expansion of crime analysts employed by the network of New York State crime analysis centers and even police departments, and the movement to implement empirical research for controlling crime, DCGS staff renamed the Community Policing's and Media Relations section to now be called Crime Control Strategies. So we pulled the media relation component and put it into the Essentials of Response and Investigative Skills component. That left us with just the community policing component of this current section. We decided to revise that section to rename it Crime Control Strategies with a focus on basically two primary goals. The new section was written to inform recruit officers what crime analysis is and the technology that's available to analysts as an effective crime control strategy. Additionally, within that curriculum, we were training recruits to understand the role between a crime analyst and an officer and how each position can support one another. And then really the second primary goal of the update to the curriculum and change was to inform recruit officers what evidence-based policing is, identify the resources of law enforcement research, and ways to immediately begin applying the research to their daily tasks. So with that said, to support the learning objectives and to ensure continuity training across the state, DCGS developed a 13-minute video that provides the recruit officers with an overview of crime analysis, how to contact the nearest New York State Crime Analysis Center, and the type of assistance that crime analysts can provide and ways and officers can support the analysts and the type of data collected in police reports. And then with regards to evidence-based policing, DCGS endorses the use of evidence-based policing strategies for gun-involved violence elimination jurisdictions, and many recruits will be working for those jurisdictions coming out of the academy. So understanding of evidence-based policing is foundational to the success of the program. And equally important, those jurisdictions that may not be designated as give agencies are also encouraged to examine police research, supported by the expansion of this year's evidence-based policing symposium, which will now include non-give jurisdictions. So providing training to these agencies' recruits will also support their efforts to implement the various strategies. DCGS worked collaboratively with George Mason University to deliver programs that provide training on the concept of evidence-based policing and effective strategies to implement the empirical research. Dr. Cynthia Lum, who's a professor at George Mason, has developed a 30-minute online training that provides a comprehensive overview of evidence-based policing for recruits. In addition, a supplement guide was developed to accompany the training, and DCGS is essentially proposing to the council the adoption of this video and guide as a required component of the section, including also the crime analysis video that was developed. I trust the council had an opportunity to review those links that were sent to those two trainings. And then additionally, as I mentioned earlier, the current curriculum has an overview of community policing as part of the curriculum. So we kept that part of the curriculum, maintained it as is, and an instructor delivering that portion would be delivered at a classroom led instruction, and it would cover the concepts of community and problem-oriented policing. With that said, the motion that's being proposed to the council is basically two motions. The current curriculum, which is now being renamed Crime Control Strategies, will remain at 2 hours. Part of that would be to play the crime analysis video as well as the evidence-based policing video. That can certainly be assigned as homework to recruits to offset some of the training hours as we certainly have been increasing hours in the recruit curriculum, or it can be played within the classroom and not assigned as a homework assignment. In addition to that, there is that classroom-led piece on community policing and problem-oriented policing, a fundamental skill of any crime control strategy. So with that being said, the 2-hour time window for this section will remain the same. You'll have to be a general topics instructor to deliver this training. And the second motion would be for this training to take effect beginning for all academy classes on or after January 1st, 2020 that begin.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion and ask the one making the motion to please read the motion.
I'll go ahead. Motion 1, approve the 2-hour crime control strategies curriculum as the minimum standard of instruction in the basic course for police officers or equivalent, specialized investigator course, and campus public safety course, and require all instructors teaching this section to be at minimum a general topics instructor.
Okay, that's motion number 1. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, that motion 1 is carried. Motion 2.
All employers and academies conducting the basic course for police officers or equivalent, specialized investigator course, and campus public safety course, beginning on or after January 1st, 2020, must utilize the newly approved curriculum.
Okay, do I hear a second? Second by Professor Clofus. I saw him raise his hand. Okay. Any further discussion?
I could just give a nod to Dan Bollock, who's in the room here. He's our new media specialist that we hired, and if you had seen the video, the crime analysis video, that's his works, and certainly I would consider it very high professional quality and a great job putting an overview together.
Good job, sir. Thank you. That was well done. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Okay, motion 2 is carried. And we move on to item 6B of the agenda, Molly Bates on ancillary statutes.
Thank you, Sheriff and members of the council. Before you today are updates to the ancillary statutes section of the basic course. Based upon recommendations from academy directors and to reduce duplicative materials, the current objectives on mental hygiene law and ag and markets law have been removed, as this information is discussed in their respective sections of the BCPO of fundamental crisis intervention skills and animal cruelty. New objectives pertaining to the New York State Good Samaritan law, syringe access and opioid overdose prevention, overdose prevention have been added, as well as an objective to provide local jurisdictions the flexibility to instruct laws based on their particular needs. Staff determined the local option was the best fit due to a wide range of need according to survey responses from academy directors. Some of the suggested laws were correction law, the SAFE Act, ATV and snowmobile law, labor law, general municipal law, and some parks and rec statutes. So because that was so wide ranging, that the section would be years long if we taught every single, mandated every single law. So that's why we decided to just give the locals their option of, teaching whatever based on their needs. The current objectives or elements that discuss public health law, alcohol and beverage law, and NCON law are still relevant, so they remained in the section. The hours of instruction will remain at 2, and just a general topic certification is needed to instruct the section. So no major changes. And that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I see you have vaping in there under the public health law.
Yeah, that was just because the law was updated to include the term vaping now, so we included it in the objectives as well.
Very good. Any further discussion? Okay, if we could read the motions, Chief.
Approve the 2-hour Ancillary Statutes curriculum as the minimum standard of instruction in the basic course for police officers or equivalent, specialized investigator course, and campus public safety course, and require all instructors teaching this section to be a minimum of general topics instructor.
Okay, motion and second. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. All right, motion 1 passes. Motion 2.
All employers and academies conducting the basic course for police officers or equivalent, specialized investigator course, and campus public safety course, beginning on or after January 1, 2020, must utilize the newly approved curriculum.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. All right, motion number 2 is passed. Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right, course director orientation training. Josh, you're back up.
In March of 2018, the council approved a series of amendments to NYCRR parts 6018 all the way through 6026 to essentially strengthen DCJS's compliance efforts and ensure MPTC courses are taught in accordance with the council's standards statewide. Among the amendments was the creation of a course director designation and training course that will allow the council to certify and train individuals who administer MPTC course offerings. A new 30-minute online training course appropriately titled Course Director Orientation, which is being presented to the council for approval, will be required to be completed by a course director. And a course director is basically anyone who administers basic training courses, in-service courses, and related MPTC courses reportable to DCJS. I have sent, and last week a link was provided to the council members of the training for their review and any feedback. That course will ultimately end up being hosted on our ACADIS learning management system, and I'll briefly speak about the rollout process of the course if the council should approve this training.
This is online training, Jeff?
This will be online training, correct. So the following 5 objectives are what's covered in the training. So the first objective, again, it goes through all of the applicable parts of the NYCRR that applies to someone who's instructor, or course director conducting any MPTC course, in-service course, any basic training course. All these sections, depending on the type of course that's being conducted, would apply. So there's an identification of those sections in the training, explanation of what those sections are, and also directing anybody who would be submitting a course for approval to DCJS and conducting a course to review those regulations to ensure that they have an understanding and are aware of all the regs that exist. Second objective in there, the council passed requirements to be a course director. The training goes over those requirements, informs an individual what those requirements are in order for them to meet the course director designation. And then the third objective covers the difference between the MPTC and non-MPTC course. MPTC courses have a slightly different approval process than non-MPTC courses, and it also then breaks down the that documentation process in objective number 4, and then objective number 5, it moves into also the certification process, how certificates are issued for MPTC courses and non-MPTC courses. There's within the training, there is a link that will be provided to anybody who is a course director to any of the applicable regulations, course administrative guides, and a reminder of the importance of reviewing and obtaining the most current MPTC curriculum prior to conducting any course and prior to submitting anything for course approval, that there's review done of all the regulations and such that apply to that course prior to conducting any training. The implementation plan for this online training is I know Natasha might have an update on these regs, but upon signature of the governor, the regs are immediately effective. So once the governor signs these regs, we would then release we conduct a small pilot of specifically the training directors. We would pilot those individuals, roughly 30 to 40 different training directors. We would send the training to them. They would pilot it on our new ACADIS learning management system. During that process, when the regs are effective, if there's anybody else that submits for course approval during that time period, we would provide the link for them to conduct that training also. After approximately a 30-day time window, we would have tested and piloted the system. If there's any kinks in it, which we were confident there won't be, but upon 30 days, we would then issue a statewide announcement to everybody, making them aware of this new requirement that was signed into law and also the requirement to complete that training. At that time, then, we would then have fully rolled out this required online training. And the motion that DCJS is presenting to the council in anticipation of the governor signing the course director training is to adopt this training as an MPTC minimum standard of training for course directors, and any course director that completes the training would receive an MPTC certificate. So if there's any questions regarding the training or regarding the motion, I'd be more than happy to address those.
Okay, so when you say it's got to be approved by the governor, sorry, why do my eyes start rolling?
Well, the regulations that change need to be approved by the governor. The actual training itself doesn't need to be, but the training references those regulations that are in effect.
That's into your Code of Rules regulations.
Correct. Yep.
If I could just remind, the council voted on this in March of 18, if you remember, when we redid all the instructor and director, we created the director, and within it, the idea came about that we needed to make sure we had defined the director positions and had that in NYCR. Those are the ones that are waiting. Tasha can talk about their status, but we said that we decided it was important to have an actual program that we could point to that they had verified it.
So it's a proactive step to have the program in place, hopefully in anticipation of signature.
Right.
Refresh my recollection on is the decertification of a course director covered within the curriculum?
There's a portion of the training that reminds any course director that if they don't adhere to the rules, that it could result in suspension or revocation of their instructor certifications or course director certification.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, any further discussion? Professor, you want to make this motion?
I do. Let me read it for you. You want to approve and adopt the course director orientation training as a minimum standard of training for course directors. Any course director that completes the training will receive an MPTC certificate of completion.
So here's a second. Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same. Okay, that motion passes as well. Thank you, Josh. All right, now we move to informational and update items. Regulation amendment updates. We've been here before, Natasha, and here we arrive again.
I'll be brief. I think I spoke enough today. Going back onto the course director regulations, as you remember, these are the hybrid regulations. There are certain parts in the NYCRR, for example, parts 6018 and 6019, that go to the public comment period, and they did, and we received no comments. And then there are other parts 6020 through 6026, that require the governor's signature. So the only way, like I said, it's a hybrid. So the only way I could do this was to submit the entire package for the public comment period. And as I said, no comments. And then once that was over, I sent the package over to the governor's office for their approval. And I noted that, there are no issues with this. As I said, they went to the public comment period and we received no concerns or issues with those regs. Can they please sign off on these? So hopefully we'll receive an answer soon. The other regs, they're still over there. There's the item. The bills I can see, but hopefully the course director ones we can get a sign off on because, like I said, they were in the public comment process.
Well, I've certainly wrote a couple of letters regarding those and didn't get a response. So, but we stay tuned, as they say. Defining statutory required reportable use of force incidents. Mike's not here. Are you handling that, Mike?
Yeah, I'll
Mike,
speak at great risk to try to fill the shoes of Mike Green, who can't be here today. But and Joanna can help out as need be, or others. But this is an issue as part of the criminal justice reform enacted in this year's budget. Obviously, there's much of that. We know about it in a variety of forms. This body's already dealt with part of that already in amending the MPTC use of force model policy, as you recall, because there were statutory obligations within 60 days for the police departments to have policy. Subsequent to that was the statute on reporting. Because we were on such a tight timeline, I think also just to remind you, at the June meeting and updating the model use of force policy, we just referenced the statute as far as reporting that was going into effect, I believe, on July 11th, if I'm not mistaken. So, and we did that solely because it was a time crunch, and it was the best way to get it done in the time period required. So since then, and with summer meetings, state chiefs, state sheriffs, state DAs, a lot of feedback that we've had, staff around the table here, myself included, phone calls, visits around the state. There's been a lot of questions and concerns regarding the use of force reporting statute that was enacted in the budget. Yes. A couple, clarifications again that we just like to repeat to law enforcement folks that question, and legitimately, that this was language that the legislature provided to us. It wasn't what we defined. We're dealing with it as everyone else is as well. So there's been, lots of feedback, lots of questions and concerns. And just to clarify, a couple points. There was news reports out there from, I can't remember the name of the senator or whatever, that said DCJS would, work to define the statute, the terms within the statute. It's not in the statute. It's not in there at all. What the statute requires us to do is collect information from local police departments who are required to report, and then for us annually to post that publicly. So, I think we're left in a position where we've heard from the constituents out in the field, the practitioners. We've heard a lot about that. We're faced with the statute, and as we've talked about as a staff, and all the way up to Commissioner Green, who was going to present on this today, is that we basically look at this as that we have two options. First of all, we can do nothing and just have departments report with their own interpretations and definitions of what that statute means and says. One of the things that would discount that option is the fact that we're getting all these questions from people that want some level of guidance, and rightfully so. So, we don't necessarily think that that's the most viable option, although we don't specifically have the authority to define them. We're trying to act within the interest of what we believe to be the legislative intent, to collect data, to collect consistent data, possibly for some level of analysis. And we have concerns about the first option, that if we just leave it how it is, we're going to have inconsistent reporting. The data is going to be questionable as far as any type of analysis, and the reporting will even leave, as publicly reported, there'll be many, many more questions we anticipate as far as what this all means. So that's option one. Option two that we considered was, as we've done in many issues with this body, from contemporary policing issues, whether it's new statutes or model policies or whatever it is, to consult the council to get some level of endorsement on this process that we've used time and time again, and with much success, is to impanel a subject matter expert group that consists typically, as you know, of the state chiefs, the sheriffs, the DAs, state police, NYPD. It would be our Office of Criminal Justice Records, who's very important in collecting all this information. To put this panel, put a panel together, again, with the practitioners, very importantly, at the table representing their constituents out there, to come up with some level of consensus as to this reporting, so that we can define it, so that everybody can reasonably agree to it, that it can be reported to the state accurately and consistently, and then subsequently reported publicly in the same fashion. We think that that's generally the intent of what was put out there, although just with some of the drafting issues, we We see some limitations, but we do feel that we wanted to bring it to the council, and the commissioner, as the head of the agency, in his authority, felt that it was within the spirit of the law as far as bringing it to you for your consideration, that we would ultimately look for an endorsement to go down that process. And then I will defer to Johanna and Natasha on the subsequent actions thereafter, whether it's regulatory or in the model policy.
So, you go.
Oh, no, I mean, right now, the regs they're in the emergency reg process and also the public comment period. And the public comment period ends on September 22nd. And as of right now, we haven't received any comments or, any proposed definitions or anything dealing with the regs as of this morning. But I'll continue to monitor that.
Yeah, and I think our thinking was that once we got the endorsement from this council and got the body impaneled, hopefully we would be encouraging those that were already involved in the use of force policy. The agencies, obviously each agency and association can choose to appoint whoever they want, but those people have already been involved with the process and helping us, that they would work with us to help create some definitions that would be put into the regulations so that it would be easier for all those who've been asking us. But as Mike indicated, we want to make sure we have that input from those in the field and others involved in creating those definitions that would then be put into regulation.
I know that it was my thinking, and certainly other council members may have another thought, but the establishing a task force like this has been a great benefit to both you and the council regarding establishing model policies. And it seems like the model policy has got to be a guidance going forward for law enforcement in the state. If I've heard it from one chief or one sheriff or whomever, everyone's got a different version of what they think the definition of brandish means. And so it's very concerning as to nailing that particular definition down as to what that truly means, and some of the different tasks that police officers are involved in and some of their various functions or display or whatever. I think it needs to be defined, but I'm all for establishing a task force. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
No, it seems to be the right way to go. I'll just say it, if we don't do it, somebody else will. I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it may be, I agree, definitely. If it comes from the practitioners, if it's acceptable on the legislative end, then I think it's much more.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't usually go the other way. So if we can influence from the practitioners, I think that would be extremely beneficial.
Agreed.
And just one quick comment on that. I guess it's a really good logical follow-up. I guess, the legislature's already spoken. And in the end, when year one comes up and whatever we end up reporting, we're going to end up hearing back from it. So as far as the agency, whether it's good or not so good or whatnot, so it's pretty much, I think it's incumbent upon us to really work this, and there's no better way to do it than include the people out there that it affects the most, which is...
What's our timetable?
The emergency, I think we're going to have to delay the reg. I mean, we have to do permanent regs at some point. We have the opportunity to delay.
We can extend the emergency regs.
The emergency regs for a little bit.
Well, even the reporting was a temporary solution.
It was, but I mean, we would impanel a group ASAP.
Yeah.
Try to get this done by the December meeting,
Yes,
right?
I was just going to say, our goal is to have it presented for the council for endorsement at the December meeting because, obviously we have departments out there that are asking these questions. We understand that there's a need out there, and as this has gone, it's already, a couple of months into it, we want to make sure we can provide it as quickly as possible. And we think with the existing panel that we have, who hopefully will come back again, very good working group. We've had a great opportunity with them that we can reach that by the December meeting.
Okay.
We all deal with government. If we leave it to every agency's devices, at the end of the day, it's going to be apples and oranges. It's not going to be able to communicate, and it will be over-reporting and under-reporting. And it's funny you bring that up. You're right. The executive committee, we sat down, brandished, displayed. In some instances, agencies may under-report with their interpretation. And at the end of the day, when the legislature looks at what we've done, it may not be too coherent.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. MPTC model policy, Josh, I know that I had some conversations with Mike Wood regarding facial recognition and the need to start to take a look at that issue and model policy wise, and anxious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, along kind of the same line that Dr. McBride said, we need to probably get out in front of the discussion and take on the contemporary issue of facial recognition.
Yep.
And, the council has definitely demonstrated that in the past already by getting out ahead of use of force issues, identification procedures, recording custodial interviews. So I think this is just another policy or piece of guidance that the council can get out ahead of, because it's certainly, facial recognition continues to rapidly advance and as far as an investigative tool and really an effective tool to aid law enforcement investigations. So DCJS basically would like to propose to the council to continue to lead the discussion in some of these contemporary issues through the creation of a facial recognition model policy. Along that same line, the council adopted in 2009 a hate crimes model policy. Every once in a while, I think we need to dust off some of the policies and take a look at them again, and with a second eye and for an eye of whether best practices and things like that have changed regarding that particular topic and guidance that the council has issued. So what we'd like to do also is not only create a facial recognition model policy, but look at the hate crimes model policy and basically put it through the same process as we do with any model policy development. Enlist a panel, a subject matter expert advisory panel consisting of different associations and key stakeholders, and have them work with our office to develop a model policy or update the hate crimes model policy and present to the council for their review and adoption. With the endorsement of the MPTC for these two model policies, our goal would be to present to the council in December of 2019. That would be certainly our goal. With that being said, there's potentially 3 agenda items already for the December meeting: use of force reporting, and then both of these model policies.
Josh, if I could, the hate crime also, I don't think it's been signed yet, but it's a dual both House bill has been passed regarding the requirement for hate crime policy. Am I remembering that
I
correctly?
believe there's a hate crime requirement and also a training component.
Training component.
Which we do have already.
Yes. So we just wanted to make sure we got that ahead of that to assist departments with that.
Okay.
One quick comment again to Dr. Go ahead.
Yes, Professor.
Sure, I just want to say congratulate you on pulling this together, the facial recognition stuff. This is a very difficult issue. I do some work in California, and there are a number of towns there, including Oakland, that has passed city ordinances disallowing the police from involving themselves at all in facial recognition. So there's bound to be lots of controversy behind this. There was with fingerprinting originally and then with DNA, and this is going to be right there. So this is going to be a very sensitive issue.
Yeah, this certainly is a contemporary issue that we'd like to get out in front of.
Yeah.
If we don't, somebody else will.
It's coming. I mean, to your point, I mean, we expect it. I mean, it's all over the country, as Professor Clofus mentioned. I read articles virtually every day from the East Coast to the West Coast. It's being talked about in D.C., probably not in this session. I think we could expect something. And, again, as previously referenced, some of the model policies that have been adopted by this council have been used to inform discussions in the legislature, and I think that's super important here, really important. Especially in the use, again, it's a complex issue, private sector, public sector, I mean, there's a lot of things, but in the law enforcement world, this is where this council is,
right.
Good. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Hate crimes, model policy update?
I just covered that. That was,
okay.
That was
nothing, you're done with that?
Done, yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, any Before I get to new business, let me I want to thank Josh for all your liaison regarding this hearing thing. Thank you, Joanna, for all your legal assistance. And thank you, Natasha, for presenting that case and doing your due diligence on that. And David, thank you for your testimony and everything. We don't often have those types of hearings, but we got through it. And thank you all for all your work on that.
For the record, was that the first hearing we've ever had?
Yes.
Nice job, Chairman.
Yes, thank you.
We thank all the council. Now, any new business that we need to discuss?
I just want to remind people that I'm still interested in, we rather, are interested in mandatory in-service training. And with everything going on, it becomes even more important in terms of having some kind of program, minimum program. So, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but the accredited agencies do fine. They have to do something. Large agencies, state agencies, municipal agencies, they do fine. It's just the smaller, under 25 person departments that, we don't know. So that's all.
Okay, anything else?
I might have missed it, but I'm not sure if we adopted the minutes from last meeting.
We did adopt.
We did do that? Okay.
We did do the adoption of the minutes, yes.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. I've missed it sometimes, but
it's my turn this time.
Professor, thanks for hanging in with us. The next meeting of the council will be December 4th, 2019. Same time, same location, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nobody's Thank you all very much. Thank you, Stephen, for your assistance.
5 minutes to sweat.
Thank you, Michael.
Have your day here.
No, absolutely.
All right, let's hold on now.
I'm ready to pass out.
Josh is just snack time. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Good job, Dave. Of course.
No water, but